have a moment, so we're just gonna film my June wrap up. There was a June 2 years ago when I read 15 books, the most books I've ever read in a month. And I had such incredible reads. I remember We Shall Sing a Song into the Deep, Vita Nostra, The Justice of Kings. Like, those are three that stand out for 1 month. If I were to look back next year on this June reading month, I probably would not be able to tell you anything that I have read. So I feel this strong frustration about that I just am not reading what I need to be reading. Here's my June. It wasn't a bad reading month, but I don't think anything will really stick with me. Let's get started with my DNFs. I tried Archive Undying. There was something with the writing that didn't gel with me, which is unfortunate because I really enjoyed the interview with the author. This is just not for me. This was like AI gains sentience and pilots robots against humanity or something like that. I could be completely wrong. I didn't get very far into it, so I can't actually tell you or review this book for you. I listened to about 50%. I got half of the way through Song of the Six Realms, I think it was. This author I have read from in the past. She wrote Magic Steeped in Poison, I think. And I loved that one. It was tea magic. Like, oh, that's so cool. This one, music. Magic with music. I am struggling to find books that employ music in a really great way, and this one had so much potential, but there was some odd way that it was being told. Like, they were telling the story of their life, except it was bland. Like, and it's weird because she was so detailed about things like, oh, and I walked, maybe that's what it was. It was just too detailed to be believable. Like, this is cool for setting the scene, but it was a lot of telling. And I was really struggling with the telling. It just didn't make things go forward. And it took like 30% in to actually get somewhere in a kind of cool way. I have written things in the past. I'm not published. But if I were looking at this manuscript, I would almost say, why not, instead of telling the before at the beginning chronologically, why not put the action bit at the beginning and then have little flashbacks back and forth so that you get the main character's background? That would have made way more sense. I would have been way more invested. This didn't work for me, and it's unfortunate. She's a chin player. It's like this very famous, like a zither almost. It's a Chinese instrument. And so in this fantastical world, she is very adept at playing this instrument. And this is a rich man's instrument. This is played in palaces. And there are so many different techniques. And I really wish we could have like delved into that a little bit more with more magic, and it didn't. So unfortunately, I DNF'd it. This one I am super duper sad about. I tried it. I really did. Children of Time. Okay, here's what I can tell you, my takeaway from it. I got 20% in. This is a story of humanity trying to create the ideal Goldilocks planet, and then something goes wrong on Earth, and then those humans come, and they come to this perfectly terraformed planet, and it is a quarantine zone, and they're not allowed on. And I'm not going to say much more than that. This is such a cool concept. The writing, I must say, I will read something else by Adrian Tchaikovsky for sure. The writing was incredible. Like, it was so smooth, it was so gripping, it was experimental in some things. It was so cool. I really, really liked it. There is a POV, point of view, from a spider. And it's not what you think. It does not creep me out to be reading from the point of view of a spider. However, I have a weird thing where I can't read books by non-human speaking characters. So give me a talking dog, cannot get into it. Talking mice, cannot do it. Give me a whole story where the animals are talking about each other and all of that, like Animal Farm or like, what's that, Watership Down or whatever. Like, can't do it. Nope, no, thank you. So here's this whole really cool experimental chapters. It was a full narrative about cool spiders fighting ants and warfare and all of that, and really, really neat. I can't do it. It's not for me. So sadly, this was a DNF. But Adrian Tchaikovsky, I promise you, I will read something of yours if it doesn't have animals talking or insects. Okay, onto the books I did read. The first book I finished was called Bright Ages, or The Bright Ages. This is a nonfiction about that really pesky era in history that people call the Dark Ages or the Middle Ages. And it's sort of this non-name for 1,000 years. It's like, what even happened then? I was struggling to figure out if this was a book for beginners, and I came to the conclusion that it is not. This is not your introduction to the Middle Ages. However, if you've taken like one course in history and you were kind of interested in the Middle Ages, I would recommend this one. The authors did a really smart narrative decision in which they bookended it with this church first being built and then being the source of inspiration for Dante's Inferno. The best part about this, so I took a bunch of medieval courses at university for pure interest. These were like extra courses that I took. The thing that surprised me in university that we don't get in high school is the inclusion of Middle Eastern scholars and their narratives of European history, because hello, the Mediterranean is bordered, yes, by Europe on the top, but then also by the Middle East and Northern Africa. And those pieces of land produced so much scholarship and so much intelligence that I can't even begin to describe to you how much has been left out of the narrative. So this was a fabulous, fabulous overview of those pesky Dark Ages. This next one, I wanted to be really good, and here's why it didn't work. Wait, first, let me tell you about it. This Wretched Valley, I don't know, this piqued my interest. It's a survival climbing horror book. This is about a group of hikers that discover this mountain that may have never been climbed before, so like rock climbing, and they want to be the first person. They get this really famous person who's been sponsored by some climbing gear, and she's gonna be like documenting the whole thing and Instagramming it and streaming live, and like that's cool. The first chapter was incredible. Like, if you know anything about the Dyatlov Pass incident, this first chapter prologue was so reminiscent of that. 100% this was inspiration. This was the weirdest, wackiest first part. Like, if you just read this chapter, you would be like, I need to read more. This is where it went wrong for me. I ended up reading this book over like 7 days. This is a book meant to be consumed in a day. Because I kept having to put it down, it lost all tension for me, which is unfortunate because there is weird stuff going on. And I learned a lot about some fungi that are really gross. Like, I'm not going to show you a picture of it. And if you are interested, there is a fungus called dead man's toes, and 100% they look like toes sticking up out of the ground. And it is like, this was cool. It was neat, but because I ended up reading it over such a long period of time, this ended up only being 3 stars for me. Lonely Castle in the Mirror had piqued my interest from I hadn't even heard anybody talk about it, but it popped up on my Libby app. My library recommended it, and I really enjoy translated work. So I'm like, oh, okay, this was a bestseller in Japan. Great, I'll try this out. This was lovely. This was a lovely little story about a bunch of kids that are skipping school for whatever reason, and then this mirror or opens up this portal and they get to travel to this castle where they get to escape reality and just like be themselves. And it's lovely, and it's a lot of commentary on the mental health of Japanese students. This was a lovely exploration of that. There is a minor critique for me in this, and I cannot figure out if it's a translation thing because I had the same issue with Tales from the Cafe. I'm not sure if it's a Japanese writing style thing. I'm not sure if it's translation, but there is something distant about the writing where it feels like you cannot connect to the people, even though they are fully developed, have their own problems. You want to feel for them. I struggled to close that gap and really truly take it in and feel it. The rest of it was so lovely. I could super duper easily see this as a Ghibli film. Like that is the kind of like the style of whimsy that I really enjoyed, and the back and forth between reality and this castle life. You know, you imagine the castle to be like full of color and whimsy and wonder, and then the flatness and expectations and weight of responsibility of reality. This reminded me a lot. There was an anime a long time ago, I'm going to date myself, called Dot Hack Sign. Something very similar where someone goes into a video game and they get to be themselves in the video game, and we get some snapshots of them in real life. It's very much a theme that happens, and I really enjoyed this one, so I give this one 4 stars. My only 5-star of the month surprised the heck out of me. This was the one that I pulled out of my jar, and that is The Year of Biblical Womanhood. I spoke a little bit about this in my mid-year freakout, but if you missed that video, I was really surprised by how wonderful this exploration of womanhood in the Bible really was. I was expecting a non-religious person to be kind of poking fun at all of the ancient rules and going, oh, ha ha, I get to do this, and ha ha ha, I'm gonna go and do this, and like, oh, patriarchy, blah, 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 blah. Wasn't that at all. She is coming from a place of religious background, and she is curious about how the women are portrayed in the Bible. So interspersed throughout the story, there are stories of women featured in the Bible, the named women, and she does a little bit of an exploration with each of them, figuring out how they've been interpreted, how their interpretation has changed over the years, and possibly getting back to a proper translation, like what words were actually used and why they are seen as certain things. In and through this, she is doing kind of silly little experiments that I would kind of, okay, they're like a little bit comical, and they could be a little bit flippant if she didn't actually go and do her homework. She goes and she speaks with rabbis, Orthodox Jewish woman. She speaks with some Quakers. She goes and stays at some sort of monastery that's where they're silent, and she spends, a weekend being completely silent and hoping God will talk to her. Her experiments were a little bit silly, like renting a baby for the weekend and following Martha Stewart's How to Cook and Clean kind of book, a la Julia and Julia, that sort of era. I think this is 2012, so that's right around the time when this was like popular to do. And blogging. So she's got links to all of her blogs in there. TLDR. Love this. This was a 5-star read for me. Will this be a favorite of all time? Probably not, but would I absolutely recommend people try reading her stuff for sure. The main conclusion of the whole book: every woman is on their own faith journey. It's not one way to be faithful and have love of God. 5 stars. Coffee break. Last one. I went to go read this one because my sister was taking an English course, so I wanted to read this with her. That is We Have Always Lived at the Castle by Shirley Jackson. Thankfully, this is a short book. Shirley Jackson writes ominously really well. This is a quaint little book, and it reminded me of I Capture the Castle the whole time, except I Capture the Castle is not a horror book. We Have Always Lived at the Castle is it? It's an unsettling book, that's for sure. It is about a toxic relationship. There is two sisters and an uncle that live at this house, and there was some sort of scandalous big thing that happened to the family. You figure it out in like the first little bit. It's all about the sisters, and they slowly reveal what happened, and it's slow. It's really slow. I kind of was bored with it. So, I mean, I gave it a very generous 3 stars because Shirley Jackson has this great way of writing ominously. But was it engaging? I don't know. I wouldn't recommend this one. Maybe Shirley Jackson isn't for me. Yeah, 3 stars. I liked The Haunting of Hill House a lot better because it was weirder and more things happened. That's my June wrap up. I'm not going to remember any of these books probably. I mean, the Year of Biblical Womanhood, I might. My name is Karen. I'm the Book Libranaut. I read all types of books. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon. Such a weird month. Like there's nothing that I'm really like passionate about. Like nothing I would really like recommend to read. Okay, where do I start with this one?